When India was divided in 1947, one state bore the heaviest burden of that decision. It was here that millions of lives were shattered almost overnight. No other region in India suffered pain on the scale that this one state did. That state was Punjab, a land of fertile fields and flowing rivers that suddenly turned into a river of blood. People who had lived on their land for centuries were divided in a single moment by a line drawn on paper. Yes, this is the story of the partition of Punjab. While the rest of the country celebrated independence in 1947, Punjab was mourning. Families were torn apart, homes were lost, and loved ones vanished forever. A dark uncertainty hung over the people as they wondered what the future held for them and their children. This partition may have been a line on a map, but in reality, it was the division of an entire civilization. Historian Ramchandra Guha writes in India after Gandhi that the partition of India, especially in Punjab, was a human tragedy on a scale never witnessed before. It was an event that gave birth to two new nations, but also left a deep and permanent scar on the lives and minds of millions. Today in this video, I will take you through this painful chapter of history. Why was Punjab divided and who was responsible for it? Stay with this video till very end to know everything. The partition of Punjab was not an overnight event. Its roots lay in decades of social, political and religious developments across the Indian subcontinent. This was a slow, unfolding process shaped by countless historical moments and deep social change. The collapse of the Mughal Empire left a powerful vacuum in Punjab. Maharaja Ranjit Singh rose to fill this gap, capturing Lahore in 1799 and establishing an independent Sikh empire. Under his rule, Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs all held high positions in the Sikh court. But after Maharaja Ranjit Singh's death, the balance of power began to collapse. The British slowly surrounded the Sikh empire, and in 1849, Punjab was annexed by the East India Company. After taking control, the British introduced deep socio-cultural changes in the region. They followed a clear policy of divide and rule, encouraging divisions along religious lines. In 1882, the Hunter Education Commission introduced new education policies. These policies largely benefited upper caste Hindus through English education. Backward caste and Muslims were left behind, widening gaps within Punjabi society. Slowly, distance and distrust grew among communities, but this was not the only reason behind the partition. At the same time, India's internal politics was also undergoing a major transformation. By the early 20th century, nationalism was rapidly rising across India. In this charged atmosphere, the Muslim League was founded in 1906 to safeguard Muslim political interest. Soon after, the Hindu Mahasabha was formed in 1915 to represent and protect Hindu interest. As both organizations grew, their political paths began to collide. Movements like the Khilafat movement and the Shuddhi movement further intensified tensions in Punjab. What was once social difference now began to harden into religious identity. Slowly, divisions between communities became sharper, deeper, and more difficult to bridge. All these historical processes came together to create the condition in Punjab where the idea of partition slowly took root. British policies, unequal land structures, and the politics of religious identity reinforced one another over time. Together, they shaped an environment in which the partition of 1947 unfolded not as a simple political decision, but as a devastating social tragedy. Historian Bipin Chandra writes in India's freedom struggle that the British government deliberately used communalism to weaken the national movement. A clear example of this was the introduction of separate electorate, which allowed voting based on religious identity. This decision had a profound impact on Punjab. Muslims formed the majority population in the province, while Hindu and Sikh communities held greater economic power. This imbalance made Punjab's political and social problems far more complex and far more dangerous. By the 1930s and 1940s, the Muslim League increasingly moved towards the demand for Pakistan, while the Congress firmly opposed partition. This growing political confrontation directly threatened Punjab. Muslims made up nearly 53% of the population, while Hindus and Sikhs together accounted for about 45%. The remaining population belonged to other religious communities. In such a demographic reality, the demand for Pakistan was bound to have a deep and unavoidable impact on Punjab. In this tense atmosphere, every community in Punjab was anxious about its future. Around the same time, another demand began to gain attention, the call for an independent Sikh state. Even today, some people speak of Khalistan, but this idea first took shape in the 1940s. Leaders like Master Tara Singh, Baldev Singh and Gurbakhsh Singh Preet Lahari began demanding a separate Sikh state, often called Sikhistan. Although this demand existed earlier, it gained real momentum during 1946 and 1947. Sikhs feared that partition would leave them trapped between two uncertain futures. Either they would be politically absorbed within India or marginalized in Pakistan. British initiatives like the Cripps Mission Plan and the Cabinet Mission Plan debated the Sikh position. But despite these discussions, the Sikhs were never assured an independent nation of their own. At this point, the Sikhs wanted neither to join Muslims majority Pakistan nor to lose their identity in a Hindu majority India. Under these conditions, Punjab became an extremely sensitive region. It sat like a power keg where even a small spark could trigger widespread violence. The Mountbatten Plan poured fuel on an already raging fire. On June 3, 1947, Lord Mountbatten announced the plan for partition of India. Under this plan, the country would be divided into two nations, India and Pakistan. Provinces like Punjab and Bengal were to be split based on Muslim and non-Muslim majority population. That partition was coming was no secret. Almost everyone sensed it, it was inevitable. But what followed shocked the nation and pushed Punjab dangerously closer to the flames. Incredibly, the task of drawing the borders of Punjab and Bengal was given to a man with no connection to India. He had never visited the country before and knew nothing of its ground realities. That man was Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer appointed by Lord Mountbatten. Cyril Radcliffe knew almost nothing about India's culture, geography or demography. He was handed a few outdated maps, old census figures and dangerously limited information. Most astonishing of all, he was given just 5 weeks to complete the task. Historian Dominic Lapierre and Larry Collins write in Freedom at Midnight, a man who had never spent a day in India was given a pencil and a map and asked to cut a civilization in two parts. Now imagine what kind of line could be drawn in just 5 weeks. There was no humanitarian thinking behind it, no scientific logic and no understanding of ground realities. That single line sliced through villages, farms, homes and even families. People went to sleep feeling safe in their own houses. By morning, their neighbors had become citizens of a country they had never imagined. This was especially devastating for the Sikh community. Their sacred sites and fertile lands, central to their identity for centuries, was suddenly split between two nations. For example, the Gurdaspur district became one of the most fiercely debated regions because of its strategic importance to India. It was only after intense political maneuvering that India secured access to Jammu and Kashmir. For the Sikh community, partition proved to be a devastating blow. Many of their most sacred religious sites fell on the Pakistani side of the borders. These included Nankana Sahib, Panja Sahib and Kartarpur. Along with these holy places, vast stretches of Punjab's most fertile agricultural land also went to Pakistan, deepening the sense of loss and displacement. Radcliffe himself later admitted that he did not know until the night before whether Lahore would fall in India or Pakistan. That uncertainty explains what followed the next. The moment the Radcliffe Line was announced on August 17, 1947, chaos exploded across Punjab. Violence erupted in thousands of villages. People abandoned homes they had lived in for generations and fled simply to stay alive. The declaration of this line turned Punjab into a living hell. Communal violence erupted, an unspeakable shame on humanity itself. Sikhs and Hindus began fleeing from Muslim majority areas, while Muslims were forced to escape from Hindu and Sikh regions. This was not just migration, it was a race against death, a desperate struggle to save lives, protect the honor of mothers, sisters, and daughters, and survive by any means possible. If you read Freedom at Midnight thoroughly, you understand how violence during partition crossed every moral boundary. People were killed not for what they did, but for who they were believed to be. In some areas, survival depended on proving one's religious identity in the most brutal ways imaginable. Human beings were reduced to symbols, and those symbols decided who lived and who died. Villages were burned to the ground, mosques were destroyed, gurudwaras were demolished, and thousands were slaughtered in their own field. Trains no longer carried passengers, they carried corpses. Routes between Amritsar, Lahore, and Delhi became moving symbols of death. Many trains arriving with no living soul left inside. Women suffered unspeakable violence. Thousands were abducted, countless were assaulted, and no one was spared. Not the young, not the old. This was not just partition, it was the collapse of humanity itself. If you believe that this violence was committed by only one community, that would be a grave mistake. In this storm of bloodshed, there was no clear line between victim and perpetrator based on religion. Sikhs, Hindus, and Muslims, all three communities were drawn into a cycle of revenge that consumed everyone. Hatred fed hatred and violence answered violence. Historian Stanley Walport writes in his book Jinnah of Pakistan that India and Pakistan were born out of blood and fire. According to Walport, the scale of violence in Punjab was beyond imagination. He believed it was a tragedy too vast to be fully captured on paper. The personal losses of millions, their pain, grief, shattered lives were beyond words, beyond history books, and beyond descriptions. Official records suggest that nearly 14 million people were displaced during the partition of India and Pakistan. Punjab alone witnessed more than 5 lakh deaths. Over 75,000 women were abducted, and many never returned to their families. The real numbers were far higher because countless crimes were never recorded. Millions walked for days, even weeks, without food, water, or shelter. Those who survived the journey reached refugee camps that lacked even the most basic necessities. Disease and starvation were common even inside the camps. Children were separated from their parents, and families were torn apart forever. This was not merely the drawing of a political border, it was the rupture of a civilization, where people who had lived together for centuries were driven to spill each other's blood. Historians like Ian Talbot and Yasmin Khan argue that this catastrophe did not erupt overnight. It was the result of years of hatred, spreading rumors, and the deep negligence of the British administration. When the British fixed August 15 as the date for independence, there were no serious arrangements on the ground. There was no police preparedness, no adequate military deployment, and no concrete plan to protect or rehabilitate the displaced. The leadership of both India and Pakistan gravely underestimated the scale of what was about to unfold, and that is why partition transformed neighbors who had lived together for centuries into participants in a bloodbath. This partition was so painful that its memories still live on its hearts of the people of Punjab, even today. In Delhi, you will meet elderly men and women who were forced as children to leave everything behind and survive in refugee camps around the city. Nearly 5 years ago, near the Delhi University camp, I met an old man who told me he had arrived in Delhi completely alone. His entire family had been killed in the violence. You will find millions of such stories preserved in Partition Museum. The letters, broken bangles, faded photographs, and blood-soaked memories kept there remind us of one more haunting truth. This was the true price of freedom. For the Sikh community, the partition of Punjab was especially devastating because it triggered a deep identity crisis. They were neither Hindu nor Muslims, and in the chaos of partition, they felt they belonged nowhere. Many Sikhs felt betrayed by the British government, by the Indian National Congress, and by the Muslim League. They had hoped for an independent Sikh state, or at the very least, a political arrangement that would protect their identity. But partition shattered those hopes. Sikhs were reduced to a minority, first in Pakistan and then in India, where many feared their voices would be lost and unheard. After partition, Punjab, whether in India or Pakistan, was left facing enormous challenges. The most urgent question was how to resettle millions of displaced people in entirely new countries. In India, the task was overwhelming. The government had to provide shelter, food, and employment to millions of refugees arriving in East Punjab, all of them carrying the trauma of partition. Many families were forced to live in a refugee camp for years. When land was allotted, it was often far less fertile than the land they had been forced to abandon. As a result, countless refugees had to give up farming and adopt new trades, businesses, and professions. They were not just rebuilding their lives, they were learning to survive within an entirely new social order. India's leaders, especially Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, were forced to confront this massive humanitarian crisis. And they had to do so while simultaneously building a brand new nation from the ruins of partition. The situation in Pakistani Punjab was no different. Muslims migrating from India began settling there, carrying the same wounds of displacement. They too struggled with rehabilitation, security, and finding employment in unfamiliar land. Entire communities had to rebuild their lives from scratch. Renowned economist and historian Irfan Habib notes in his studies of India's economic and social history that partition dealt a severe blow to the agricultural economies of both the nations. The damage was so deep that recovery and rehabilitation took not years but decades. After partition, Punjab's economy was thrown into complete turmoil. The irrigation system, once the lifeline of the entire region, was suddenly divided, forcing everything to be rebuilt from scratch. Industry and trade were also deeply disrupted by the chaos of partition. And yet, the people of Punjab refused to surrender to despair. The resilience, hard work, and fighting spirit helped them rise from this immense tragedy. Slowly, life returned to Punjab. Agriculture revived, industries grew, and new opportunities emerged across sectors. Despite witnessing unimaginable horrors, the people did not give up. The prosperity of Punjab today stands as a powerful testament to their indomitable spirit and resilience. Friends, the tragedy of partition has left us with some deeply important lessons. The first lesson is clear. When politics divides people in the name of religion, the result is only violence and destruction. Historian Bipin Chandra believed that communal thinking and the hunger for political power pushed the subcontinent towards this tragic partition. The second lesson is about human resilience. Millions lost everything, homes, families, and identities, yet they did not give up. They began again, rebuilt their lives, and reshaped their future. Cities like Delhi, Amritsar, and Ludhiana stands today as living proof of the hard work and courage of those people displaced. The third and perhaps the most important lesson is this: we must remember history so that we do not repeat its mistakes. Historian Ramchandra Guha reminds us that the stories of partition reveal both the cruelty and the courage of humanity. Books like Pinjar, Tamas, and Train to Pakistan keep this pain alive even today. Not to reopen old wounds, but to remind us of the true cost of hatred and the value of humanity. If this story moved you, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more such deep, honest explorations of our history. Because remembering the past is not about reopening wounds. It's about making sure we never repeat them. Thank you for watching and subscribe to History Connect English.